Allah says, the creator of all that there is and all that there ever will be, that the majority is wrong. Assalamu alaikum. I am Moses, and well, basically I'm talking about this topic because I thought this was something that is very interesting and a very, very strange message from the Quran for those who do end up reading the book and finding this very strange concept therein. For those who don't know, I am Moses. Most of my work up until now has been in Urdu/Hindi. So that's probably a reason if you are to listen to me today, or if you might find this video down the track, I will be a voice you have not heard of yet, or haven't heard much of. But as time goes on, essentially, I'd like to start talking more in English. Anyway, what I will do today is I will talk about the topic. Why is the majority wrong? So not just the fact that the Quran, Allah, the creator of it all, says emphatically, so that's the creator saying that the majority is wrong, but also why does he say that? And why is this sweeping statement, such a strange one for those who, I would say, do not expect to find this in, well, frankly, in a book of religion. And for reasons that they would not really appreciate or associate from the deity, the created deity of a particular religion or faith. Anyway, without further ado, I will continue on. And by the way, for those obviously who are following me in English and we haven't spoken before, haven't communicated, because as I said before, I've been doing a lot in Urdu. If there are comments as we talk, as we are live, we're more, I'm always happy to have a two-way conversation. If you have questions at the end of what I've got to talk about, we could bring those questions up there and have a chat. And depending on time and how many people are interested, we could open up the platform as well, where you, if you want, can come on the show, join me, and have a chat about the topic. All right, so let's make a start. Our modern sensibilities say that majority is right. So if you live in the Western world, if you live in a society, even if you live in Pakistan or India, I would say pretty much anywhere in the world today, the prevailing view that we have that defines us as a species is that the majority view is correct. That most people, most of the times, will be correct. That it is okay to be part of that, the vast group of people who are all doing, behaving, acting, working, interacting the same way. And this is, I would say, probably something that has really defined this age that we live in. But what's also quite interesting is that this is not something new for the Muslim world. So the Islamic world that we call Islamic world today, that being the one that's founded on fiqh or books of hadith and history and all that sort of stuff, is interestingly something we find there as well, where they would argue until cows come back home that majority is always right. The majority is right. So if you follow the path of the majority of those who call themselves Muslims today, then you are on the right path. Majority is right. The term that they derived is ijma', and as I've talked before in the Urdu videos, there is nothing called ijma' in the Quran. There's nothing like that in the Islam of the Creator gave to us. In fact, the ijma' that they talk about, there is no ijma' on the definition of ijma'. And in a way, that's quite ironic as we start talking about this principle, that even though we find ijma' as something to be proud of, something to be appreciative of, something to celebrate, something to hold as a banner to say, here is our rallying call because we all have ijma', we all agree, hence that is correct. In fact, Allah says otherwise. So this is going right back to the topic. Allah says, and I will show this, that the majority is not right, majority is wrong. So I guess in summary of this particular slide, despite what our modern sensibilities say, despite what we have heard from our clergymen throughout the centuries, the majority is not right. Brainlock brother on the comments, Assalamu alaikum to you as well. And that's actually a very good point as well. So I will just show his comment as it came in, because this was very relevant to what I was saying before. Again, if we are to start picking basically any particular standards and say, well, this has to be right because it's followed by the majority. Well, today's world, at least in name, we still have more Christians than Muslims. So does that make them right? In tomorrow's world, when we have got more people who are spiritual, or more people who believe in no God, Well, does that change things then? And now we have to suddenly start saying, well, everything else, no matter how right it might be from any other perspective, that thing that has the most number of people, that has to be right because it's got the most number of people beside it. That is not how the world works. And this is not what the Quran says. Right, continuing on. The Quran, and I will show this because, again, I may be repeating this slightly for those who've been listening to me in Urdu, but again, as I said, I'm trying to reach out to audiences in English as well. I always back up what I say with references from the Quran, and I will bring them up as time goes on. So, well, as the session really goes on. So this is just setting the scene to be absolutely clear as to where I'm coming from based upon what I understand the Quran to be saying. So the Quran very clearly, Allah, the creator of all there is, makes it clear, makes it absolutely plain as sun. Majority is not a standard that we are to hold or that we have to tie ourselves with, or basically use that as a rallying cry to establish the veracity, the truthfulness, the truthiness of anything, of any phenomenon. The question that I would like to also ask is why? So there are two aspects to it. One, does the Quran say the majority is wrong? Now this, I think most people who have read the Quran seem to know about it, so this may not surprise a lot of people. But what I would also like to focus on is the why. Why is it so? And on that particular why front is where, if there are people who would like to talk today, or as time goes on, you missed it, you end up finding this video through the YouTube's algorithms down the track, you want to raise a comment, then leave it there as well. Leave your reasons, share your reasons as to why this majority, despite our modern sensibilities, is not something to hold by. I'm going to make another point, and some might not like it, but this is my reading of the Quran. The Quran does not speak to a person seeking religion or seeking rituals or seeking the semblance of a system that tells that person how to become how to live like an automaton, how to rise, how to brush their teeth, how to go to the bathroom, which foot to enter the bathroom with first, when you're wearing clothes, how to wear the shirt, when you're eating, which hand to use, how many sips of water you must have in what capacity, way to look around. Allah in the Quran says, frankly, nothing of that sort, which I think is quite weird. Is quite strange in a way. But the point that I'm really making here is that the Quran, in my understanding, is for rebels. I will say this again. The Quran is for rebels. Assalamu alaikum to you as well, philanthropist. Why do I say that? Because if we are to read the Quran without the paraphernalia, and without all this extra literature that has been imposed on the Quran unjustly, that Quran has no resemblance with, if we just read the Quran and we try and see, honestly, academically, without any attachment to whatever culture or society or religion we were born in, we find that the Quran breeds a generation. So the followers of the Quran are people who challenge the status quo. They do not live in the status quo. They are those who ask difficult, tough, uncomfortable questions. They are the people who uphold the truth even when that is against them. So if they would be in trouble because of following the message, yet the expectation for them is to continue to do so. And these people, these rebels, they are not afraid of being in the minority. They're not afraid that they would be laughed at, or they would be ridiculed, or they would face hardships. They are a people who do not obey the majority, yet do not care for whatever might and can and will happen against them. Continuing on, and this is a point I referred to before, and again, sorry if I'm repeating this for those who had listened to me before in Urdu. Al-Quran is very different to what you would expect from a religious book. For example, the sort of things that we might expect to see here or find here, I honestly speaking just do not find them here. You know, even if you try and superimpose meanings in here, it still becomes an impossible task to somehow reconcile what the Quran says with versus this other literature that's also paraded around and masqueraded as Islam. For example, and by the way, in comments, Brother Musa, another namesake, Brother Musa Saidu, Assalamu alaikum to you as well. What we don't find in the Quran is how to worship. We just simply don't find it. Now, I'm not even talking about the terms that have been, whose meanings have been twisted out of what the Quran says towards a ritual worship. But even if I were to grant this point to the traditionalists, we just don't find a way to worship. There's no etiquette for religious places. How to go to this shrine, this religious place, this place of blessing and tabarruk and all this and that. There's no etiquette for that. The places, this might be subject for later, aren't even named the way we understand them. There's no mention of any religious festivals. There's no Eid in the Quran that I know of, sad as it might be. There's no Eid, there's no Eid of the Prophet's birth. There's nothing. There's all of these festivals that we find, unfortunately, our yearly calendars are drawn based on religious festivals. Festival for this, festival for that, etc. None of them, not a single one of them, exists in the Quran. Frankly, and I'm trying to be very. I don't like to. I'm not trying to insult people, but when I read the Quran, what I expect this to say is so different from a religious book that the differences are massive. If I were to pick up a religious book, what do I expect to see? A religious manual. That would be a book for men, because we've all been patriarchal, haven't we? We've all, the societies that we've formed, even today's ones, are patriarchal in nature, whether we like it or not. We pass them around in the name of Allah, and that is yet another injustice we do to women folk, but that's a different matter. A religious book is a book for men who wear funny hats, funny-looking hats of different shapes and sizes and colors. They've got long titles before and after the name. And by the way, this is beyond any particular culture or tradition. We all have seen it. We have all done it. We find this phenomenon in all cultures of the world. These people don robes, garments that are different from the masses, so they can stand out. And what's really fascinating is once they've set up this facade of a religion, because they've got this book that they can drive back to, they end up creating titles and degrees and all that sort of stuff that they not only have created themselves, but also pass on to others as well. So you become a specialist in their religion based on a religious book that may not have any bearing to the source. What am I saying here? Where am I going from here? When I read the Quran, I see, frankly, no relevance and no justification for this class of people who act in a specific way as if they speak in Allah's name, and yet the book just doesn't say that. So Al-Quran, I'm going back to the topic here, I'm linking it all up, I'm not just rambling. Al-Quran is not a book of religion. I will repeat, it is a book for rebels. It is a book for those who shatter, who destroy the mold. It is not for those who stick within the boundaries of what we might expect religious books, people who follow religious books, to be doing. What is the Quran about? The Quran, Allah's message, is all about challenging the status quo. It is about non-compliance to the wrongs. It is not about standing and watching and letting things go pass by you. It is about rejecting the groupthink. No matter what goes on around you, if that is wrong, you are meant to not accept it. You're meant to fight it. Per the Quran, there is to be no following. And this is quite a radical thought. Now, for those who will listen now or later and who have got nothing in common with the Pakistani Indian culture, they may not be as surprised by this. But people who have been brought up in the subcontinent and some Arab countries as well, because I speak with them, we have a huge following. We have a huge cultural association in following things that happened before us. There's good and there's bad in it. But regardless of how we were brought up, the Quran's message is clear. The follower of the Quran, this rebel, is not a blind follower of elders. He does not listen, follow, obey, and go after his forefathers or her forefathers, ideologies that they were brought up in, whether they're from their friends or society or whatever, they don't follow them. They are not of importance to them. The culture they were brought up in, the society they were brought up in, the language that they speak, the clothes that they wear, the food that they eat, nothing of that is to be followed blindly. Now, this part in particular, I find this very strong in India, not so much in Pakistan, but there's almost worship of where you were born. So this is my country, this is my motherland, in the literal sense. I worship it. I'm going to follow and obey and lay down my life for this. This abstract thing we have made up, and we follow, mostly because we see others follow as well. Quran rejects it. As somebody would say in Arabic, jumlatan wa tafsilan, completely, utterly. There's no point for that. Your culture, whichever country you were born in, your nation, doesn't matter. I'll go one step further. Even your religion does not matter. The word religion, madhab, does not appear in the Quran at all. Deen is what we find in the Quran. And as I've gone through this many times in Urdu, it does not mean religion. It bears no resemblance to what we find being paraded around as Islam. Your worldview, whatever your worldview is, well, that's one thing to have it. But don't ever stand by and say, I'm going to become the follower or a slave to my worldview. And lastly, I think this is quite important, because we live in a society where we've got so many memes and things and traditions and trends happening. We almost can't keep up. But per the Quran, you are not to be a follower to the whims of the moving winds. Just because certain things are in vogue does not mean that they should be something you follow as well, without thinking through. I'll ask the question again. Why does Allah stop us from doing it? Again, for those who have read the Quran, I think the first part of today's topic is reasonably familiar, even if it hasn't really permeated through their souls or the psyche. That yes, the Quran and Allah do not like people to just become part of groups and start talking, thinking, acting like automatons, despite the fact that we do that. But again, why? Why is it so wrong? What is wrong with it? And this is where I'd really like to hear what people say. Assalamu alaikum to Mushtaq in the comments as well. Who is the Quran's ideal human? Right? The ideal human. So this book for rebels that I was talking about, well, what sort of a person does this book expect? And this is where soon I will be taking a detour and bringing up the verses of the Quran. So it's not just me saying stuff out of nowhere, leaving no references, no nothing in my wake. But as I've said before, once I've made this point, I will open up the Mus'haf and we will go through it together. So who is the Quran's ideal human? Well, he is a rebel. She is a rebel. This person is a thinker. A thinker. Isn't that shocking? I mean, just saying that out loud, I shouldn't laugh, I shouldn't chuckle, but I find myself having to do that because the Quranic ideal of a person is so different to what we find the religious ideal of a person. So maybe I should have done a little bit of a contrast. So the Quranic ideal person is not someone who wakes up before sunset, before sunrise, does ritual ablution, wears certain types of clothes, wears a certain cap on his head, and then stands up by himself and does a ritual prayer to a deity that he cannot see, and then moves on and continues to do and take part in all of these religious activities throughout the course of his day. That is just simply not the Quran's ideal personality. You are a rebel. You break the mold that you find around you. You are a thinker. You are constantly thinking. You're constantly challenging what you see around you. You are a helper. A helper. A helper is such a huge thing. Helping people out there is such a huge, I would say, take away lesson from the Quran that I don't think we talk about enough. The Quran's ideal person is an enabler as well, where they may not be able to help themselves, where they may not have the thinking apparatus or the smarts, the genius to come up with these enterprises. They still enable wherever they can, in whatever capacity, in whatever circle that they have. And in the comments, Assalamu alaikum to you, Gariba. Sorry if I'm not saying this name out loud. It's probably a Gharib but I'm not sure. And most importantly, Quran's ideal person is a promoter of peace and justice. And he and she, they spread these ideals wherever they go. They're not just standing up and saying, I say I believe in God. I say I believe in Allah. It's not a shahada one gives from his lisan, from his tongue, which may be truthful to you, but has no weight behind it. As one of my favorite authors, George R. R. Martin says, words are winds. Words have no value. They have no value. They're nothing. Anybody can come up and say anything. That means nothing. What matters is what you do, how you take your words and translate them into action, whether it's through thinking, helping, enabling, whatever the case might be. And the last part, which I think is such an important thing and kind of goes back to being a rebel, Quran's follower is a rejecter of falsehoods, no matter what type, no matter what kind, and whatever capacity they find these challenges, these problems, they go against them. Now, having said that all, and this is a shocking bit, I think, for those who are listening, those who watch after, prepare yourselves. You may become all of these types, right? You may become a rebel, a thinker, and you think, oh, I'm this fantastic personality now. I am the Quran's ideal, right? I've made it. Have you? Don't be too quick about it. Even these rebels, if they become and form their own group, even they are not to become too comfortable in their thinking. A mission started is not a mission done. Even the Prophet in the Quran, even the Prophet Muhammad, even he in the Quran is chided if and when he makes a mistake. So no matter who you are, if you are a true follower of the message, even when you are following it, you do not say, I've become, I have the hidayah now, or I am guided. You say, I am seeking guidance. I am continuing to be on the right path. Every day, every moment, I'm fighting. Every moment, I'm struggling. Every moment, I'm striving. That is a true rebel. You don't just stand up and, I actually haven't lived in a communist society, but it's not like you wake up in Mao's China one day and they give you this red little book and you say, because I've got this red little book, I've made it. I'm part of the rebels now. No, it doesn't work like that. You got to put in the hard yards. That is how it works. These are what my friend of mine says, al-ayat al-kawniyah. These are the signs of the universe, Allah's signs that we see everywhere. So why does Allah not approve of this groupthink, this majority that is so wonderful to be a part of? It's so comfortable to be in the embrace of this all-encompassing society where we don't have to think for ourselves. You know, we get told what is good, what is bad. This is biryani, and from this shop in my particular city in Pakistan, this is the best, and I just simply go along. It's not quite like that. Why does Allah not approve of that? So this is where I do have a few slides, but I'll take a pause from this part here and go and look at some of the ayahs of the Quran, and we'll just have a talk and see what the Quran says about it. So without further ado, let's bring this up. So I did something really simple. You know, I'm somebody who believes that if you can do something easily, you should do it. There are a lot of places, a lot of ways I could have searched the Quran to say where and how does Allah talk about majority. I've gone for the easy way, which is I've searched for akthar, which is most, and I have typed that in the Mus'haf, and I've got about 81 ayat, 82 results, where Allah, the creator, the sender of this book, has used this word to describe how he finds the phenomenon of what does Allah think of most people agreeing? What is when people get together and they decide or do something, what does Allah say about it? So this answer should not be a shocker if you've been listening to me from the beginning. In all of these ayat, all of them, Allah is not happy with those who are part of the majority. The majority is not proving ever in these ayat to be a marker for you to be on the right path, right? So if you were to say, I'm reading the Quran, and you find the word majority, akthar, aktharuhum, and you would expect that maybe most of these people would be good people. No, most of these majority, all of these majorities are of people who have done mistakes. I'll give you a few examples and I'll open up these ayat and we'll talk about them in detail. Bal aktharuhum la yu'minun. No, most of them do not do amana. Akthar an-nasi la yashkur. Most of an-nas, of the people, they do not do shukur, they do not connect to God. Wa aktharuhum al-fasiqun. Most of them are people who do fisq, who do not do things the right way. We can continue on. Wa aktharuhum la yaqilun. Most of them do not use their aql, do not use the intellect, do not think, do not they're not the Quranic ideal of a person who's not just breaking the molds, but he's a thinker. He thinks. You're just not that. وَلَكِنْ أَكْثَرُهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. So there are a lot of these ayat. And what I've done is, this is my habit, this is how I understand the Mus'haf, through tartil, through going through all of these ayat where Allah mentions these terms, to see how the author of this work uses his own terms to make a point. And I'll open a few of these ayat and we'll go through them one by one. So, first one. Now, I think if I were to just read this one ayah, that's it, and say no more, I think I would have achieved the purpose of this session today. Let's read what the Quran says. وَإِن تُطِعْ أَكْثَرَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And if you were to follow most of who are on the earth, يُضِلُّوكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. They will divert you. They will make you go astray from the sabil of God, from God's path. إِن يَتَّبِعُونَ إِلَّا الظَّنَّ. They are not following anything except for conjecture, for assumptions. وَإِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَخْرُصُونَ. And they are just making things up. They have no confidence. They're not certain. They're not sure. Let's look at another one. وَعَدَ اللَّهِ. Now, again, Allah, this is the message of Allah we're reading. Now, even if you don't believe in God, even if you don't believe in the Quran, if you're being honest, the author of this book calls the sender Allah. That being, that entity, is making promises. He's saying that if this was to happen, this would follow. وَلَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. For example, that a man will only get for what he tries. You don't try, you don't get. That is the qanun, that is the law of Allah. This is how He set it up. وَعَدَ اللَّهِ. So this is what the ayat to me is referring back to. وَعَدَ اللَّهِ. Allah's promise. لَا يُخْلِفُ اللَّهُ وَعْدَهُ. Allah never breaks His promise. He never goes back on His promise. His sunnah, sunnatullah, God's sunnah, nobody else's sunnah in the Quran. God's sunnah does not change. وَلَكِنْ, but أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. But most of the people do not know this. If I pause here for a second, and if you look around yourselves, you know people around you, right? Or if you watch this video afterwards, think about your friends, your family. If you come to this channel, to this video, and if you've lasted this long, then you're probably one of those people who have wondered at times, why don't people get it? Isn't this quite simple? Allah says do this, do that, right? But despite what He says, what we find people saying in His name is something completely different. Do they not know? Do they not understand? What is the problem? Well, this is Allah's answer. Allah's promise never changes. What He said is true, was true, will remain true. These are His ayats. These are His qawaneen that we see in our lives. Most people do not know them with ilm. So this is, I would probably make a little bit of a nuanced observation here. Allah doesn't say, وَلَكِنْ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْرِفُونَ. Most of the people don't know, as they've translated here. It's لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. They do not know with the conviction, with the experience that comes with knowledge, with ilm. And it's something I talked about, by the way, on my Urdu video last week or the week before. Then ilm and ulama in the Quran have got nothing to do with people of religion. In fact, an alim in the Quran is one who has ilm, who has knowledge of a field in this alam, in this kawn, in this universe that Allah has created. So most people do not recognize that Allah's way never changes. The way it was, the way it is, the way it shall be. They do not have yet absorbed this with their ilm of Allah. I think this ayah in itself is something we could, if you really want to do tafakkur, tadabbur, think about it, ponder, that would be something that you, with the Quranic ideal, would want to do. Let's look at another one. أَمْ تَحْسَبُوا أَنَّ أَكْثَرُهُمْ يَسْمَعُونَ أَوْ يَعْقِلُونَ. Do you, now this is talking to one person, أَمْ تَحْسَبُوا, you, the reader. Now that the first recipient of the Quran has passed the message on, I'm reading it, you're reading it, I'm reading it out to you. أَمْ تَحْسَبُوا, you, O listener, and to me as the reader as well. أَمْ تَحْسَبُوا أَنَّ أَكْثَرُهُمْ يَسْمَعُونَ أَوْ يَعْقِلُونَ. Do you think that most of them use their hearing or use their aql? Do you really think so? إِنْهُمْ إِلَّا كَالْأَنْعَامِ. No, they are like cattle. بَلْ هُمْ أَضَلُّ سَبِيلًا. No, in fact, they're worse in their ways. What is Allah really saying here? He's not talking about people. Most of them are, what's the term today? Sorry, I haven't kept up with the terms. We used to call them special children back when I was a kid. I think there's a differently abled, I think is the right term here. Maybe in the comments somebody could mention. If you're that person, is Allah saying that most of those people are like that, and that's why they don't understand what Allah says? Or is Allah saying that most of them are deaf, their ears don't work, and that's why they don't hear what you're saying? Or an excuse that we hear all the time nowadays is, oh, brother, akhi, anta la tafham al-Arabiyya, la tatakallam al-Arabiyya. You don't know Arabic, you have no idea, we don't understand Arabic as well, we can't understand it. Well, no, there's nothing like that. What God is saying is that people who don't wish to engage the intellect, they might have the brains, the brain power, they have the ability to listen, to hear, to ponder, but they choose not to do that. They choose to be part of groups, the groupthink mentality, where these faculties that distinguish us from animals end up going to waste. And Allah, from Allah's perspective, this is the creator, even if you don't believe in the creator, and I'll emphasize that, from this book's perspective, the creator, when that voice, that authoritative voice talks, that authoritative voice is clear. And that voice is emphatically declaring that those humans, no matter how clever they might think themselves to be, if these people are not those who use the intellect in whatever fields that they work in, then there is little that distinguishes them from animals, from robots, from things that we make, from automatons, from robots of musk that we might find in our houses tomorrow. There's no difference. Let's read another ayah. أَمَّ اتَّخَذُوا مِن دُونِهِ آلِهَةً. Or are they taking beside Allah other alihah, now I won't call it gods, even though the translation here says gods, alihah, other things that we have made up, that we follow, that we make centers of our attention, centers of our focus. So our culture, our religion, our language, our food, pride in whatever thing that might be, whoever we made our ilah, our children, our wives. When I say wives, so it comes out wrong. Women in general, if I'm talking about myself, all of these things that we make our allies, our aliyah, God is talking about them. قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ, bring your evidence. Here's where the interesting thing starts. هَذَا ذِكْرُ مَنْ مَعِي وَذِكْرُ مَنْ قَبْلِي. Here is a message, a reminder for those who are with me, and a reminder of those who were before me. Reminder, a dhikr, Quran, which has the dhikr. This dhikr is being talked about. بَلْ أَكْثَرُهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ الْحَقِّ. But most of them, even though they have ears that they hear with, even though they have eyes they can see with, even though they have minds they could have used, but they don't use, they do not know the al-haq. And we'll see this term al-haq come up quite a few times. فَهُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. And despite the fact they turn away, they do not pay attention. They do not pay attention. Assalamu alaikum to you. On the comments, one world. Yeah, one day I will talk about this in detail. I'll take a very quick detour just to answer that question, because it kind of came up with the ayah I was talking about. Allah, laysa kamithlihi shay. There is nothing like him. So if anybody who insists on giving that Allah a certain form, function, does not do the being of Allah any justice. But anyway, that would be something that we probably have to come back to at some point. Assalamu alaikum to you, Irfan, Ahmed Faruqi as well. We shall continue. And I think anybody who's read Surah Yusuf, there is, in the very end, some instructions that are being given to the first recipient of the Quran, being Nabi Muhammad, Rasul Muhammad, after him to us, those who read the Quran. And I think these last few ayat, they are earth-shattering. And I'm not known to exaggerate. Those who have been listening to me know I do not do that. But I think these particular ayat, if we were to pay attention to them, if we were being honest to what the message here says, we should be quivering, shaking in our boots, all of those, all of us, me, anybody who thinks he is guided, he's sorted, he's got it made. Allah does not say that. وَمَا أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ وَلَوْ حَرَسْتَ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. So first of all, most people, even if you harasta, talking to one person, again, talking to you, talking to me, talking to all the people who will read the Quran after we are long gone, Allah is saying, even if you, Musa, tried, most of the annas will not become the mu'mini. They will not be part of this group. And if we go just a few more ayat afterwards, from this group who did become mu'min. Now I should clarify this point. I have talked about just this in a video in Urdu. Brother Musa, all of the ayat have references on the right. So if you can see my cursor, you can see every single thing. And this is the reason I use this website, because it saves me a lot of time from having to reference or copy stuff and paste and keep mentioning. So if you want to, for all those who are on a mobile phone, for example, maybe if you can't see, if you were interested in the references of all the ayat I'm mentioning, you don't want to search for yourself, feel free to watch it back, either zoom in or go watch from a desktop computer, and you will see these ayat. So I will highlight, for example, this part here, 12:103. So Surah Yusuf, 12:103, Allah, and this is the point I made in an Urdu video just on this, Allah says most of the annas, even if you tried, will not be part of the group called mu'mineen. That is a different group. It's not a group of religious people. It's a different group. Most of them will not be there. Now, if you made it, right? If you think, oh, I am no longer part of the general masses. I am from the mu'mineen group. I am somebody special. I'm somebody distinguished now because I've become one of the mu'mins. Well, this is where the shocker comes in, where I honestly say we should all be quivering. We should not, nobody, including me, can sit comfortable, because Allah says, وَمَا يُؤْمِنُ أَكْثَرُهُمْ بِاللَّهِ إِلَّا وَهُمْ مُشْرِكُونَ. Most of them, most of those, most of whom, most of the annas who you wanted to become from the part of the mu'mineen, most of them, even when they become part of this mu'min. So say you're 10 people, out of 10 people, most would not be mu'mineen. So let's say you got 4 people. Now from that group of 4 people, most of them, God is saying, will not be mu'min, true mu'min to Allah, except whilst they are also mushrik. This I will repeat, because I think this part really deserves it. Allah, the Creator, that authoritative, emphatic voice that we find in the Mus'haf, that voice is telling you, me, all of us, and all the people coming down the track, you have to try, but you cannot convince people to do what they have the free power to do. But even when they do become part of their group, most of them will not be able to give up all the shirk that they do. They will, despite the fact they are mu'min, and this is the crazy part, right? Allah is saying mu'min can be a mushrik. So never say a mu'min and a mushrik are two different things. But mu'min is a set, and a mushrik is a subset from the mu'mineen. That is what Allah is saying. So a lot of the mu'mineen, as per Allah, from this ayah, they believe and they do and they say and they try and they act as Allah wants, but they add others besides Allah. It's not just Allah for them. It's Allah plus somebody. It's Allah plus a man, plus a man, plus a man. It's Allah plus it's Allah's book plus a book. It's Allah's message plus a culture. They've got alihah. We've all got our alihah. And this is what Allah is reminding us. So even if you were to give up the majority, so you left the most of the annas and you became part of the smaller select group of mu'mineen, you are now rebel. You're rebel now, right? You're thinker, you're enabler. Even then you have to be careful that you do not do shirk. You do not associate anything in Allah's name. You do not let any man, including me, or any woman, or anybody else, take his spot. You do not let them legislate in Allah's name. You do not let them say, hada halal, this is halal, hada haram, that is haram. No one should be writing any books of what is right, what is wrong, what is halal, what is mustahab, anything like that. None, if they are true mu'min. If you're a mu'min, you don't do that. That is what Allah is saying. Do we see this in our today's society? Is this ayah true? Or is Allah not quite right here? I think the answer, sadly is quite true. Let's move on. ما تعبدون من دونه إلا أسماء سميتموها أنتم وآباؤكم. Whoever you serve, again, this is Allah talking to a group here. Whoever you all serve, who all you say, these are aliha. We're going to listen to this, our culture, this person, Modi, Imran Khan, I'm just picking up names there, this cricketer, etc., etc., this girl I'm really fallen in love with, etc., or these people, or these other deities. Again, Allah is not talking, He doesn't talk about deities like the Hindu idols. That's not Allah's target for us. It's anything we make an idol, any non-physical thing that takes us away from this message. What does Allah say? You serve them all, and these are all things you have made up. You have given them names. You or people who were before you, your ancestors, those who had the power, the authority, the legislative rights, that they usurped and made all of these things up for you. You serve them. Your made up things. Ma anzalallahu biha min sultan. Not Allah was one who gave any authority to those names. Inil hukmu illa lillah. I think this again goes back to the last point we were making. The hukm, the judgment, the pronouncement, the declaration, the sealing of an order, when it comes to the deen of Allah, it is for Allah. This should be the be-all, the end-all right there. Amara Allah ta'budu illa iya. He ordered you that you do not serve anything except for Him, His rules, His system. And this part there, I think this is an part of the ayah. I don't know how many times we've read, we've heard, we haven't really pondered. I can't remember. For example, this is an aside. I can't remember the last time I was in a masjid, in a Jumu'ah, for example, listening to the Imam in front of me, and he brings up this ayah. He talks about this ayah, and the last part in particular. What is Allah saying? Allah says all these things that He talked about, that you only serve Allah, that you give hukm only to Him. You do not add anybody else, any person, any book, anybody beside Him. ذَلِكَ الدِّينُ الْقَيِّمُ. That, doing that is a right deen. That is a right path. Not religion, as the translator says. A deen, the path, the system. So if you do what Allah has said, that is now the path of Allah that you should be a part of. And this is a path, this is a kicker. وَلَكِنْ, but أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. But most of the people, once again, it's the same motif here. Most of the people, they do not understand with knowledge. So it's the translation is not they don't know, لَا يَعْرِفُونَ, لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. They do not know with their ilm. They have not yet gone through, thought, pondered, and then came up with their ilm to make up their minds the way they should. It's a very important ayah, and I think you can see where we're going with this theme here. Let's bring up another ayah. وَمَا ظَنُّ الَّذِينَ يَفْتَرُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ الْكَذِبَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. And all these in front of us, all those who went before, all those that will come after us, who will make up lies in the name of Allah. What is a lie in the name of Allah? That you say something about Him that you do not know. Or you say something about Him that you heard from somebody and you just parrot it on. Or you said, Allah says to do this. Allah says, don't do that. Anybody who says that is doing an iftira, a lie upon Allah. He is making up a story. What does Allah say? Inna Allah ladhu fadlin ala nas. Indeed, Allah is the one who is bountiful towards the nas. Walakin aktharahum la yashkurun. But most of the annas, more than most people do not connect with Allah appreciatively. They do not understand, they do not acknowledge, they do not return the favor through connection as they should. Let's continue on with another one. Ala inna lillahi ma fi samawati wal ard. Absolutely, assuredly, to Allah belongs everything there's in the samawati and the ard. Ala in wa'dallahi haqq, walakin aktharuhum la ya'lamun. And indeed, Allah's promise is haqq. And this is the haqq part that we talked about before. So al-haqq, haqq. Allah's wa'd, Allah's promise, that is the truth. But most of them do not know with ilm. Assalamu alaikum to you too, Brother Salam. وَمَا يَتَّبِعُ أَكْثَرُهُمْ إِلَّا ظَنًّا. Most of them do not follow except conjecture, assumptions. إِنَّ الظَّنَّ لَا يُغْنِي مِنَ الْحَقِّ شَيْئًا. And this conjecture, this is coming up with stuff, these assumptions, they take you away from the al-haq, and they do not avail you anything. إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلِيمٌ بِمَا يَفْعَلُونَ. And Allah is aware of what you're doing. So we have 4 ayat so far. I'll take a little bit of a break just for a second, because I'm also aware of time. As I said in the very beginning, those who will watch this after, those who are watching now, I haven't been talking a great deal in English up until now. So this is, let's say, I'm breaking my way in. I'm coming in and talking more and more English as well as Urdu, not just sticking to the one language. So what I generally do is I do invite feedback from people. Now today might be different, might be difficult, because as I said, this is the literally the first time where I've done something like this by myself in English, whereas I do this quite a bit in Urdu, where we put up links and people join in on the topic. We have good discussions. So what I shall do, I will paste a link in the chat, because I've only got 4 or 5 ayat, and if anybody will like to be one of the first ones to join me in this English stream and have their voice recorded for posterity, then they are welcome to join. But I will suggest, I will ask politely that we stick to the topic. And I think you will find, for those who don't know me, that I'm not somebody that you will find combative. I don't like arguments for the sake of arguments. If you've got a point to make based on the Quran, I'm most willing to listen. I might be wrong, you might be wrong. There should be no enmity, there should be no hatred, there should be no fight. There should be no bad blood between people just because they don't end up agreeing on the same point the same way. So anyway, I've made that point. I will quickly show this up here as well. And if anybody who has not tried, it's a pretty easy process. I mean, I'm talking about the English audience who probably aren't quite used to these things, these platforms that have become very popular over here in the Indian subcontinent, Pakoin subcontinent. But yeah, I'll continue back to the point. Very good point, Brother Arsalan. Should we always oppose the majority opinion? Let me highlight that, and I'm actually going to talk about it. I think the last ayah that I have actually does talk about that as well. So if I forget, I've at least highlighted your comment, so I will talk about it. So for those who will be hearing it afterwards, the question that's being asked is, majority is not a standard, but must you always as a principle oppose the majority? And I think that's a very good point. And as I said before, the why is something I would also like to hear from you. So Brother Arsalan, you're listening, you can write your answer. Maybe not, it shouldn't be a one-way traffic. I do not hold the keys to knowledge, nor will I ever claim I know what I know, but there are many things that are my blind spots. If you have an opinion as to why and what we are meant to do in a scenario like this, while I go through the other ayat, do write it. I'd like to hear what you think about your own question. Then we can have a good chat about it. All right, let's pick up another ayah. وَقَالُوا لَوْلَا نُزِّلَ عَلَيْهِ آيَةٌ مِّن رَبِّهِ. And they said, why wasn't an ayah, a sign, not a verse of the Quran, why wasn't an ayah sent, a sign sent from his Rabb? So if I try and generalize this, people say, well, you're saying whatever you're doing, where's your ayah, where's your sign? I don't see any clouds coming over you. There's no water sprouting from your wrist. Well, you don't walk over water. You're not floating over clouds. Nothing like this happens. Qul, say, Inna Allaha qadirun ala an yunazzila ayah. That Allah has the capability, Allah has the power to give you a sign. وَلَكِنْ أَكْثَرَهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. But most of them do not understand this with their ilm. And I think this ayah is actually quite something that I really liked when I thought it through. Because what is it saying? If I just read the normal translation, if only a sign could come down to him from his Lord, say to them, God is able to send down a sign, but most of them do not know. Well, I don't think the meat and bones of this ayah really comes out from this translation. Why? Because if you had read the Quran, if you're reading the Quran afterwards, what is it really happening here? What's happening is something quite remarkable. Allah never, to my knowledge, Allah never refers to lines of this Quran as ayat. I don't think anybody can point out to me afterwards or now. All of the ayat are around us. We have ayat when we open our eyes, when we look around us, when we go walk, when we engage with the laws of this universe, the skies, the gravity, the way we use our car, all of these laws of Allah, these are all His ayat. This is what Allah continues to talk about and mention, yet we do not pay attention to that fact. We divide Allah, we divide madhab, we divide religion from sciences, completely against Allah's pattern, Allah's demarcation of knowledge. For Allah, everything is His ayah. Do we pay attention to them? And from these ayat that are within our power to understand, do we try and find Allah through them? How many of us do that? How many of us really could say honestly that this ayah is wrong, because most of the people here who listen or around us actually have been pondering these ayat around them and yet not being able to find Allah? And how many of them are just sticking to listening to whatever they're hearing from the pulpits and then saying, oh, we can't find Allah. We don't understand these ayat because they were looking in the wrong place. Let's go on to another. Oh, just quickly, there's an ayah in ourselves as well. So I did not mention this last time I spoke in Urdu about ilm. Why do I like the philosophers? It's not just because I have a degree in philosophy, but Allah says, when Allah says there are ayat in you, fi anfusikum. I think this is quite remarkable. So my mind is going to people like, I don't know, Descartes. Let's talk about Descartes. Let's talk about Kant. Let's talk about Wittgenstein, who I really appreciate, even though I disagree with him on a lot of things. All of these great thinkers, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, when they think about the ayah that is themselves. They ponder, they try, they are rebels, they break the mold and they try and come up with something that may or may not be right, but they are not ones who just sit by and say, we're just going to go by the majority, follow the majority. No, they're not quite there. Anyway, we shall move on to the next point. أو كلما عاهدوا عهدا نبذه فريق منهم بل أكثرهم لا يؤمنون. So Brother Arsalan, you haven't quite answered yet, but I think this ayah in a way answers this question. So it's something I was not wanting to talk about today because it ends up from experience detracting us away a little bit. Now, when Allah does say, أكثرهم, who is the whom? So this is the part I'm talking about. Maybe I should translate this ayah first. So is it not that whenever they make a covenant or a promise, some of them toss it aside? In fact, most of them do not believe. So there's most of them, right? We have to be careful. Who is this most of them? بَلْ أَكْثَرُهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. So there's a group of people who are already doing something wrong, and most of the people from that group who has decided to do wrong shall continue to be in a state where they will not come right, because there's this positive reinforcement. There's this, you've got this groupthink constantly around you. You've got people you surround yourself with, and over time you begin to start thinking like them. These are truths. These are al-ayat al-kawniyah. These are the universal ayat all around us. We see this. We know that. The people, the company you keep, the more you become like them. So same goes for, I dare say, even terms like an-nas. An-nas does not mean the whole world of people. It does not mean, it does not mean all the people who live in the world right now. If I said an-nas, it does not even mean all the people who have ever lived, live, and will live. It does not mean that. It differs based upon the context as well. So the mafhum is always that you're talking about a majority of people. But who is the an-nas? Well, it depends upon the context. And the example I gave last time in Urdu was, if I said, Ya ayyuhan nas, and if I'm standing in front of, let's say I'm standing in front of a group of people, about 30, 40 odd people, I'm saying, oh people, to them. It's not universal to the city. If I'm the prime minister, though, and if I'm, let's say I'm Trump. I'd hate to be that guy, but let's say I'm him. If I stand and if I say, hey people, hey folks, it might sound universal, but in essence, this is still limited down to a group of people who are in that particular target of people that I was talking about. So this is something that I think we have to be very careful for. I can see we have a guest whose name I cannot read because it's in Hindi. Let me go through a few ayat and then we'll have a quick chat. I can't even say your name, I'm sorry. So I don't know if you want to change your name to something in English, then at least I can pronounce. So your comment, Brother Arsalan, let's bring it up. Yes, absolutely. Yep. Majority need not be necessarily wrong. And I think this is where Allah is giving us. So whenever he talks about aktharuhum, the hum is the group we need to understand and not be part of that group. Because if we end up being in the wrong group, well, the majority of that group will always be wrong. But there is comfort in even being in the right group and then becoming lazy, as we saw in Surah Yusuf, where Allah was saying that even in the mu'mineen, most of them are mushrikun. All right, we've got the second last ayah for today, and in which Allah says, قُلْ, say, يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ لَا تَغْلُوا فِي دِينِكُمْ غَيْرَ الْحَقِّ. Do not exaggerate in your deen, that is, and talk about things that aren't right. وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا أَهْوَاءَ قَوْمٍ قَدْ ضَلُّوا مِنْ قَبْلُ. And do not follow the vain vanities of those people who became astray before you. وَضَلُّوا كَثِيرًا. And those who have misled many. وَضَلُّوا عَنْ سَوَاءِ السَّبِيلِ. And those who have strayed off the balanced way, the right way, the correct path. And this last ayah, I think this is where I like to end. And this, I think, is again a very special ayah, a very, very beautiful ayah, a very meaningful ayah. What does Allah say? This is an order that comes through to us from the Creator in His narrative voice. فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا. So you, talking to you, one person. So you are to turn your attention towards the ad-din, Allah's deen that He's talked about throughout the Mus'haf. Which way? Hanifan, in a state of being upright, in a state of being right, in a state of fixing things, or getting things right. فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. This fitrah, this instinct, this natural instinct in everybody's heart is what Allah has made the nations on, people out of. لَا تَبْدِيلَ لِخَلْقِ اللَّهِ. There's no change in Allah's creation. Again, ذَلِكَ الدِّينُ الْقَيِّمُ. That, doing the correct thing, the upright things, being the enabler, being this person who follows the deen of Allah in the Mus'haf, that is the ad-din al-qayyim. Nothing else. No tuqus, no rituals. Allah is not talking about any rituals here. Doing iqama of your wajh, getting your attention towards the direction of the deen, which tells you all those things we talked about before. That, Allah says, that is ad-din al-qayyim. Again, وَلَكِنْ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. But most of the people do not understand this with knowledge. Okay, I will come back and just do a summary of these slides, and then we'll talk to this brother who is in the backstage. So, why does Allah not approve of the majority? So, again, Brother Arsalan, it's a question that, as you can tell, I had kind of preempted that people might ask, because it was my question as well. Well, there are reasons that Allah gives not to follow the majority. So if you were to find a group that does not meet or does not do these things, then that by itself does not make that group wrong. But if you, on the other hand, were to follow a group, whichever group that was, group of 5 friends, group of a nation of 1 million people, whatever the case might be, if they are a group who follows conjecture, they do not connect with Allah or His system, or they do not want to know, or they do not know because they're actively choosing to remain ignorant. People say they don't listen, they don't pay attention, etc., etc. That is what's happening. Or they don't like the truth because it's inconvenient. It makes the easy lives become hard. Now, I don't try and bring up politics normally, but I think this is an example that seems to work for me. If you say we're in America, right? There are many inconvenient truths that if you were a Republican, you would just not acknowledge. If you were a Democrat, there are similar ugly truths that are inconvenient and you do not mention them. You just ignore them, right? So if you are part of that group, well, you should be very careful that that is not something that you want to be a part of, even if there's a majority. Or if there's a group where they're actively trying and refusing to follow the path. So Al-Insan, for example, whenever we read in the Quran, we find Al-Insan, I'd say 95% of the time, being referred as a negative archetype. So this is Al-Insan who's fighting, who's arguing, who's lazy, etc., etc. Or if there's a majority that you're part of that does not understand, they don't try, or they're led astray by leaders who seek the short term, the dunya, instead of the akhirah, what comes after. Do we know anybody who meets that definition? In the comments, brother, the fellow who has written in Hindi, I'm sorry, I do not read Hindi. I don't know what you're saying. And again, if the group that you are part of, it's your name, Raghav. Okay, welcome, brother Raghav. And I've been a little bit distracted, but I'll come back to it. I have said this before many a time in my channel in Urdu and Hindi before. If you were listening to this, or if you were to listen to this afterwards and you thought, yet another Muslim, what am I going to do with it? Well, this is not the way Allah invites people. Allah talks to people, does not talk to those who call themselves Muslims. Al-Quran, for following, for love, for adoration, and for criticism, is open to everybody in the world, regardless of your country, culture, religion. So this is how we should be. And lastly, if the majority that you follow is one who, well, is not spreading they're spreading corruption, they don't follow Allah's system, don't be a part of that. Don't be a part of that. So this is the last slide I had. And yeah, just recapping, Allah does say, do not follow a majority. Do not follow the majority in any sphere of your life, whether it's 4 people out of 8, 4 people out of 7, or a million out of, I don't know, whatever. Do not follow them. They do not mean anything. They do not set the standard for being right, for being truth. All right. So that was that. Hope that was of some use. Let me check that out. And we have a brother called Raghav Sanskritian. Peace, brother. Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. Sat Sri Akal.
Hi, how are you doing?
आप उर्दू या हिंदी नहीं बोल सकते सर?
I can. Today I'm only talking in English. आज मैं सिर्फ इंग्लिश में बात कर रहा हूँ.
मेरे तो इंग्लिश समझ में ही नहीं आती है.
अच्छा, that's all right, brother. Maybe so apologies for those who don't understand what I'm going to say very shortly to brother Raghav. Raghav भाई, आज सिर्फ इंग्लिश में है. अगले हफ्ते इंशाल्लाह उर्दू हिंदी में होगा, तब आप भले में ज्वाइन कीजिएगा.
जी सर, मैं बाहर हो जाता हूँ. मैं बोल ना समझ पाऊंगा ना बोल पाऊंगा.
चलें, कोई बात नहीं. No problem. Next time inshallah.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, cool. So this is something that I did. A brother came in. I just got happy because I'm assuming that Brother Raghav was a Hindu, and I welcome. Well, it's not me. Allah welcomes people to talk about His message, about His Mus'haf, His Quran. There's no religion in the Quran, not that I ever found. If you're a rebel, no matter what your color, your creed, your face, your background, the name that you use or people use to name you, that doesn't matter. We all are free to talk about our Quran, and everybody is welcome. So in that spirit, I welcome the brother, but unfortunately, I think he's come in from, well, he's been watching, I'm assuming, my Urdu Hindi videos, and that's why he thought today would be something like that. So it will take some time. I haven't done a lot of work in English. It will change for those who are listening or listen afterwards. I have a few more videos coming in English. So this is something I had not let slip up until now. I have a plan to, as I make videos, and new videos in particular, not just keep them in Urdu or Hindi, but also have a copy of them in English, because sometimes it's not just good for me from a production perspective, because I can do it at the same time, but I think it hopefully will reach a different set of audience as well, and I, as a result, will get to learn from others who know more than me. So I, being a student, encourage feedback, comments, critiques, whatever the case might be. Anyway, I will just have a quick look at the comments. If there's anybody who wants to ask a question on the topic or anything like that, then I can. Yep, so there's Brother Salan. I think we've gone through and talked about your question. Just going back. Okay, I think we're probably going to wrap up there. So everybody who has been listening up until now, thank you. All those who listen to me this video afterwards, hopefully we'll get to talk more. We'll get to have more of these two-way conversations happening, where it's not just me coming in, talking by myself all this time, and you're watching it after the fact, but a two-way conversation where we have a discourse, where we may not agree on everything, but at least we have a foundation. And the foundation is, what does this particular book say or does not say? And let's go from there. With that said, I shall repeat what Allah said one last time to summarize my point. Allah said, do not follow the majority because it does not set the standard. Do not be part based on that. Do not be part of any groups where they promote you becoming a parrot or automaton, where they take away your power of thinking, your faculties of questioning. You're meant to be a rebel. You could be part of the groups of rebels, but even there, be careful that even that group, the rightful group, that should be the right group, even that group does not become subject to all those issues and problems that we find in basically all groups of humanity. As George Orwell would have said, if anybody has read Animal Farm, you being the pigs and the other animals of the farm might decide to throw away, what's the term? You may carry out a coup and you get rid of the farmer and his family, and you say, oh, we don't like the way the farmer and the humans have been subjugating us. We, the animals, are going to gather together in this revolution and throw them out. But what do you find? And this is ayat al-kawniyah, signs of Allah. Even when those animals in George Orwell and a story, Animal Farm, even when they threw out the farmer and his family, what happened? The pigs took the place of the farmer. They became the new Fir'aun. They became the new Taghut. They became the new farmers. So no matter what group you are in, Allah keeps reminding, be watchful, be careful. Do not let that group suck you in and destroy you from the inside out. With that said, until the next time, to all those who listening now, to all those who listen afterwards, Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings to all of you.